The sun does not judge itself by the shadows that it casts. Every dark moment, every time I've hit that rock bottom moment, have brought me into the darkest darkness, into the deepest cave of my own psyche. But always, reliably, on the other side of that is some amazing pearl of insight and some amazing pearl of wisdom. So when I look back at the worst days of my life, they're also some of the best days of my life, because they facilitated the necessary response and adaptation that actually brought me to where I am. Like, all of those lessons are so valuable that, you know, I'm grateful for all of those hard times, all of those brutal times that I've experienced.
They used to do the darkness retreat to create DMT in their heads as well.
About day 3, I started getting these flashing, blinking lights in my eyes, just like a pulsing, flashing light. And then by day 4, the visionary state opened up. And I had some incredibly profound visions and experiences that stick with me as so real and so like instructive and valuable. You know, our lives are just an absolute gem.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs, sharing our vulnerability, overcoming our fears, transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go? This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Aubrey Marcus, the best-selling author, biohacker, broadcaster, and entrepreneur. Your company, Onnit, specializes in total human optimization using a holistic philosophy that encompasses physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. You are a passionate advocate of the use of psychedelic medicine to heal trauma, reset the mind, and overcome addiction. You host the Aubrey Marcus podcast with over 10 million downloads and have been featured in Entrepreneur and Forbes magazine. You've also appeared an incredible 17 times on the Joe Rogan Experience dating back to 2010. Your first book, Own the Day, Own Your Life, is a New York Times bestseller, and your upcoming book, Master Your Mind, Master Your Life, provides a roadmap to free ourselves from resistance, face our inner critic, and overcome trauma. Aubrey, welcome to London Real.
It's a real pleasure, man. Happy to be here.
And man, it's great to have you. You know, we've been trading emails for 9 years. I still remember when we started, we were bouncing emails back and forth with you. You know, for people that don't know, we were an Onnit affiliate with Alpha Brain back in 2011. We were plugged in, and we were always wanting to get you on the show, and I'm just so glad we finally made it happen.
We're just on time, right on time, Brian. Made it happen.
It's perfect. And I also want to say something else. You know, you did an episode with Joe Rogan in 2010, August 2010. It was episode 46. And I watched that episode, Aubrey. I was still working in the city of London in finance. I was a credit derivatives broker. And you planted a seed in my mind that day, Aubrey. It was the first time I heard the word ayahuasca. And it planted that seed in my mind. And when we started the show, like a year later, when we started London Real after I left that, it was about 5 or 6 months later that I had my first ayahuasca experience, and it became almost kind of part of the show. And I remember thinking, there's no way I can go back because the Bank of England's never going to allow me if I talked about drugs. We thought we were going to get arrested. You know, we didn't know, because these days, everyone and their mother, they go live and do psychedelics. But back then, there weren't many people talking about it. So I just wanted to thank you for doing that, because it changed my life. It changed the show. And recently I went back in about 2 years ago, went down to Soltara in Costa Rica. I know you know those guys, and we made a whole movie about it called Reconnect. And it was really powerful. So that's all because of you. So thank you, Aubrey. I appreciate that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, this was a big passion of mine. It started when I actually graduated high school. So this was 21 years ago, and I got to go on a vision quest with a traditional shaman who took me on a psilocybin journey out in the mountains of New Mexico. And I was absolutely terrified because at that point, I mean, there's virtually nobody talking about it. There's a couple like kind of shady resources and a few people who've talked about it from like the 60s, but there wasn't anything that I could really sink my teeth into and understand it better. So I remember grabbing a rock from the land, and I was like, as long as I hold this, I'll remember that I exist. I was just terrified. And then I took the mushrooms, and at that point, I was a staunch atheist, like had no spiritual foundation, and I'm holding this and I just feel my body evaporate and just exercise pure awareness in that feeling of just being completely the essence of myself. And I was like, oh, I got to rethink some stuff. Like I got to change my perspective. My paradigm was completely altered from that point. And that got me on the journey. And of course, from the psilocybin, then went to ayahuasca and iboga and wachuma and all the great plant teachers of the world. But I feel just super fortunate that I was, crossed paths with that shaman and was able to have that experience, because it absolutely changed the course of my life. And then of course, allowed me to change the course of other lives like yourself.
Yeah, because it makes sense, because I didn't know about this vision quest till I started doing extra research for this today. And, it makes sense now because you were speaking with like kind of knowledge and authority when you were, talking to Joe 10 years ago. So you had obviously had experience with psychedelics, and that, as opposed to the guy that just did ayahuasca like a year before. And that could come out in the way you spoke about it. But I was wondering, like you said, there's no YouTube back then. There's no articles. You can't Google search it. And so you had no reference, which is hard, because even when I did it, there were people saying that it was, helpful for you. But back when you did it, I mean, most people thought magic mushrooms were for hippies and weirdos, and it probably caused brain damage. And, there weren't great narratives out there.
The narrative was you'll find the window from the highest place you can find and think you're going to fly and jump off and fly. Like that was the story that everybody was telling.
Yeah.
And of course that story is absolutely not true. It's about the last thing, you want to do on mushrooms. But it took a little bit of courage then, but I also felt really guided, whatever that thing is, whatever that capital P potential that we have, that's just always whispering in our ear and asking us, inviting us to more in our life. That was certainly present then. And it was just, fortunately, I listened, because there's been plenty of times where I've ignored that little whisper in my ear, and that doesn't always work out so well, but that time I did.
How did you know not to fight it? Because the usual instinct, the first time I tried psilocybin, I was actually in Amsterdam, and I just fought it the whole time. And it was really stressful. And I told myself never again. And that was kind of 7-8 years before the ayahuasca. So I was kind of traumatized. Obviously, it was giving me signals that I couldn't process because I was all in my head back then. But like, for you to kind of allow yourself to go on that ride, I don't know, it seems a little advanced.
That's the importance of having a really good guide. Okay. The shaman had been doing it for 40 years. So she really coached me through the mantra of the psychedelic explorer: witness and allow, and gave me metaphors. She's like, listen, you're going to be in a movie theater, and it's going to be a full 4D movie theater where you're going to experience these things somatically, and you're going to see things. And your job is to just sit in the seat and eat popcorn and let it happen, and not try to do anything. And that really stuck with me. I was like, all right, movie theater. Like I can do this. I'll hold my rock. I'll sit in the movie theater. I'll watch what happens. And, it was just the right kind of energy and the right words. And she was sitting there right with me. So I felt really comfortable, obviously only at the start. And then she left after a little while so I could have my own journey on my own. But I really give a lot of credit to her as a guide. And as you know, the importance of like the ayahuasquero and the curanderos and curanderas, like the people who are officiating ceremony, they're incredibly important, and they can make all the difference. So doing some truffles in Amsterdam, or I guess you could do mushrooms back then when you did it. That's just it's a different game, because you don't know how much you took. You don't know if you took too much. You don't know if you took not enough. You're not probably in the optimal environment. So that's not the ideal way to get your feet wet. And for a lot of us, it's the only way. And just following some of these same guidelines: witness and allow, be in the movie theater, make sure you do your research on the dose and hopefully have somebody who can at least sit for you, even if they're not an experienced guide or shaman. Just be there and be like, hey man, it's all going to be all right. And if you get some ideas in your head, like the room is bugged and people are after you, which I call like the usual freak out that people have, some kind of paranoia that comes up, they can be like, listen, man, you're experiencing the usual. Like, don't worry about it. It's all good. We got you. And that'll make all the difference.
Yeah, it's really good advice. I did the typical Amsterdam thing. I was on a canal, did the whole tub of the raw mushrooms, and then it all kicked in. We barely made it back to the hotel room, me and my buddy, as the wallpaper was coming off the walls, and then we got back. But again, no guidance. And then when I went back in later, I had great guidance. Like you said, I had a shaman or someone holding the space. I had a guy named Simon Powell on the show back in the day. I think he has a book called The Psilocybin Solution, and he always said, I remember he said it really loud in the episode. He said, be with it. Whatever it is, be with it. And I remember his words echoing back to me, even in ceremony, which is always hard to believe that you'll ever be able to remember those lessons, when you're in the experience. But be with it. So don't try to force it away. Don't even try to run away from it, or don't even hope it's over. Be with it. For me, it's usually a lot of emotions and pain, and I just got to be with it and then breathe. That's my equivalent of your rock, I think. For me, it's just breathe. When you breathe, if you keep breathing, you're always going to be okay. So
it's such an important lesson. I mean, anything you resist persists. That's the old Marcus Aurelius quote, right? But it's so true in psychedelics. And psychedelics are like a microcosm. It's like our little Doctor Strange world where we get to work out how we might deal with the regular, normal waking world when we're in these experiences. So we learn that thing that we put so much resistance into is going to be fueled by that energy. So if you're having a dark vision, a dark experience, like the worst thing you can do is try and change it. The best thing you can do is just love it and try to appreciate the beauty of that aspect of polarity, as hard as it is. I remember in my darkness retreat, which was something I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about, which was an incredible experience, 7 days, complete darkness, complete silence. And then it unlocked what absolutely felt like, I obviously can't prove it, but an endogenous release of DMT. So I was in the vision state for about 4 days straight. Fortunately, I had a lot of experience because there would be times where I would see the most horrific things, in the blackness in these visions. I would see like a wheat thresher that was just threshing over bodies of human beings. I would see like all the skulls and kind of imagery of destruction and death. And of course, like you want to turn away, but there's no way to turn away. You're not even on a substance. So it's not going to go away ever unless you like sit there and then start to see the beauty of that, destruction, which then leads to creation, right? Like the death that leads to life, and that cycle, as they say in Hinduism, Shiva destroys and Brahma creates. Like that is the cycle of life. And until I was able to just appreciate that, then the wheat thresher goes away, and then the rainbow comes in, and I'm sitting in a beautiful meadow with beautiful trees and flowers that are blooming and bees, and it just changes the minute that I can apply appreciation and love. And it's just like the medicine and your own consciousness is creating this experience for you to experience a lesson, to learn how to love that thing which you judge, that thing which you find abhorrent. Can you love that too? And that's the question it's asking you. And if you say, yes, I can, then it's like, good job, son. Like, we'll carry on. Here's your reward.
And like you said, you can bring that stuff into the real world too. And when you get into these uncomfortable situations, you can be like, well, first of all, it's not a tenth of what it feels like when I'm in situation, but now I can be like, yeah, like you said, learn from it. Can you be with it anyways? What's the lesson here? Yeah, all that stuff. Let's talk about the dark experience, because we're here. We might as well go into all of these experiences. I heard you talk a little bit about on one of your podcasts. It quickly made me remember something. So I've had a guest on London Real maybe 5 or 6 times. His name is Master Mantak Chia. And I don't know if you've ever heard him. Funny enough, he's got our most popular clip on YouTube with like 5 million plus views. And the first time I had him on my show.
People love sex.
Yeah, people love sex. And like, I'm from a, American Puritan upbringing. And, we didn't talk about sex much in my house in San Diego, even though I think my mom had the Joy of Sex book, which made me uncomfortable. But when he came on my show, he was talking about massaging the organs and the 3 gates for the women. And and multiple orgasms for men. And I was literally in the chair, like I could barely, make it through the episode. And then I started listening and learning his stuff. I was like, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. And on the 4th episode in, he said that his master I think he grew up in Thailand, actually. They used to do the darkness retreat to create DMT in their heads as well. And I had never heard him talk about this. I mean, again, I think we had to build a relationship up. And he said, yeah, we used to black out this room, and they used to go in the caves back in the day, and they would do the endogenous release of DMT. And this isn't like a psychedelic guy. I don't think he's had ayahuasca ceremonies. And he described it in such a detail that I believed him. And so then now that you talk about it, it's really interesting. So that's my only context of the darkness. Can you tell me about your experience and how you did it? And have you ever heard of someone in the East talking about that?
I have, and it's just one of those things. People go into a cave, but you don't really understand the reason for the cave until you start to dive a little deeper and understand this is a part of so many different mystical traditions. And actually, the person who is facilitating for me in the darkness, she studied in the Hindu tradition, and she was meditating with her guru for 10 years. And then the guru, after doing it, what she calls the hard way, meditating for 10 years and then opening up her vision state, and was able to, see the deities and kind of interact in that, what we would call the astral plane, right? Then her guru is like, okay, now go into this cave. And she goes into the cave, and then within a few days, she's just permanently in that space. And she got out and she said she was pissed off. She was like, what do you do to me? You made me meditate for 10 years and then you send me to the cave, and it's so much easier. It just happens. And he's like, yeah, I wanted you to learn how to do it on your own first before you had this tool that could help bring it to you. So really what you're doing is you're blocking out absolutely all light. So when people think, it's like solitary confinement. No, it's not, because in solitary, it's far more maddening because you have a little bit of light that you can fixate on. So instead of being in this womb of darkness where everything is absolutely enrobed and it feels infinite unless you bump into something, you focus on the light. And I remember when they actually shut the doors and turned off all the lights, there's one little crack that was coming through the window. I guess one of the seals opened up. So I ring the bell and come in, and it takes them a while for them to get used to the light, the darkness as well, so they can see that little crack, and then they can fix it, put a piece of black tape over it. Because I was already fixating on that thing. That one little prick of light was too much. It ruined the whole experience. And so they block everything out. You're in absolute silence, absolute darkness. You memorize the room first. The food is dropped in a blacked out hallway outside of the room. They ring a bell. You open up the door, stumble your way around, get the tray. And it was really, pretty bland food, raw vegan, just enough sustenance.
Where are you, by the way?
I'm in near Frankfurt, Germany. So
okay.
a house that they kind of made for this in Frankfurt.
Why there, and who's they?
So there's only about 30 darkness retreats in the whole world. There's not that many. And this one seemed to be the best. Now, the ones in the US, there's, somebody's attic in Ohio. And there's nothing really here in the US. And then there's actual caves. If you go down to Guatemala, you can go into a real cave and do it that way. But you're sleeping on pretty much the ground of the cave with a little straw, they made it real traditional.
Okay.
In Europe, in Czech Republic in particular, it's actually used as a therapy for psychiatric conditions. So they call it therapy nui or something like that. And so it's actually the majority of the retreats are in Europe. Okay. And this one just happened to be in Frankfurt, which seemed to be the best. And my friend Akshay, who was the one who told me about it, really explained having been there and having done it. And he actually went to my high school. We did a podcast together, and that kind of got me excited about it. I had that calling, that kind of feeling I had when I first went to do ayahuasca, I have to do that. He was the one who gave me, and this is the place he went. So we go to this little town called Sachbenwalden outside of Germany. The website's darknessretreat.net, I think, something like that. And beautiful little place. And, such a lovely facilitator who's deeply steeped in the practice, learned from her mentor, her guru, and then been practicing for a while. And just a beautiful Airbnb vibe, simple, but a nice little Airbnb vibe. Everything's blacked out. But there was a window that you could open for fresh air because they didn't have a lot of ventilation in there. So you had to open the window. So you had one of those mindfold masks, which is like a psychedelic explore is essential. The mindful blocks out absolutely all light. It's this foam thing. You can leave your eyes open or closed.
It's like for a boga more than anything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
So I would open the window just to get fresh air, which was also something that was difficult because when things got hard later on, I could think like, all I got to do is open the window and look out and all the visions will stop. Like all the challenging shit will end. But fortunately I didn't do that. But yeah, so that's the setup in the room. And like, so I memorize everything, figure out where the toilet is, figure out where my clothes are, where the essentials are, kind of get it all sorted. It ended up going a little haywire because I memorized everything based upon a rectangular rug that was in a rectangular room. And at some point I shifted that rug, I guess, moving around. So the rectangular rug was at an angle to the room. So I was running into shit for like the last 4 days of the whole retreat because my bearings were off. But so that's the room. The first few days, nothing happens from the visionary state. It's just the monotony of the darkness and the silence. And I'm just thinking about things, going through having hypothetical arguments with people that, I have grievances with, trying to plot out I decided everything. I was going to move houses in Austin. I changed careers 3 times. I started 7 projects. I quit 5 things. I was just working through all this stuff, trying to solve all of my internal angst externally, which was, what we normally do. And then about the night of day 3, I started getting these flashing, blinking lights in my eyes, just like a pulsing, flashing light. And I was like, all right, that's interesting. And then by day 4, the visionary state opened up. And it was like the twilight of ayahuasca. It wasn't full on peak where you just feel like the light pouring through the top of your head, that kaleidoscope, that chrysanthemum that's just this menagerie of colors and beasts and different things that are coming. It wasn't quite that intense, but it was like the kind of the come down or the come on of that experience. And it just stayed consistently for the next 4 days. And I had my Aura ring tracking my sleep. I was sleeping maybe 2 hours a night. I didn't know what was day or night. I knew that there was some roosters that I could hear, but they seemed to crow at all different types of the times of the day and morning. So I was just in there and I had some incredibly profound visions and experiences that, stick with me as so real and so instructive and valuable. I really credit the Darkness Retreat as probably my most transformative psychedelic experience, at least in the last, 7 years or so.
Wow. So it's almost like a little Vipassana in there too. And have you done that Vipassana, I guess for people that don't know, and I haven't done it, but it's 10 days, no talking, no devices, no distractions, and you meditate a lot. But again, of course, there's light and there's people around. But, I know Tim Ferriss has said that was as challenging, if not more, than one of his hardest psychedelic experience. So you kind of have that too in the dark, right?
Yep, you do. Because you're not talking to anybody. You don't have any sound. You don't have anything to do. You don't have any sight. It's a complete restriction of all of your senses except for the sense of touch and taste when you're eating the food. But as I said, the food was really bland, which I understand why they had the food like that, because when you're in the visionary state, nobody in their right mind would eat food at the peak of an ayahuasca journey or at the peak of a mushroom journey. It's the last thing you want to do. But at the peak of this visionary state, I would eat food and I would absolutely see the food that I was eating. So I would eat a mushroom and I would see these mushrooms coming up, pushing up out of the ground in my third eye, crystal clear. I would eat a broccoli and I would see it. But everything though, I would soap up, I would go take a shower and soap up and I would see the suds just flood my third eye vision. I would take a shit and I would see the feces as I was shitting it. It was unbelievable the access I had with that kind of endogenous DMT, which they say comes from the flood of melatonin from all your photoreceptors being shut off. And so the contrast of your photoreceptors usually being activated and limiting your melatonin to then being completely shut off and producing a ton of melatonin, which is triggered by the darkness, which is one of the reasons why we restrict blue lights before bed, et cetera, to get more melatonin. Right. But you get a flood of it, and then somehow in the chemical process, the melatonin converts to DMT, is what they said. But of course, it would require a vivisection of the brain to actually see if that was happening. And I don't think anybody's signing up for that program, but it was unreal.
And this is pretty predictable. The people that go to this retreat, does this happen to everybody or most people?
That's what I hear.
Okay.
You know, I haven't, she said that this is usual. Now for me, it happened a little bit sooner. Some people it's around day 5. So they always recommend you're in there for a week.
Okay.
But for me, it was day 3. And I'm grateful because actually the first few days with nothing happening were harder, which makes me think that with a Vipassana, that would also be incredibly challenging because you can still see, you still have access to a variety of different things, and the vision state isn't open. I mean, the one thing about being in the vision state is not boring.
Yeah.
You know, like you're dealing with stuff. I was reconciling stuff with my father. I had a vision of Buddha that came to me and brought some wisdom. You have these things that are happening, different souls, different connections that you're able to have with people who you love or people who have passed. Like, it's infinitely interesting, which I think, you know, the challenging part of the Vipassana is just the kind of sitting with your thoughts without the access to that kind of spiritual dimension, which was actually beneficial. Now, challenging for sure, but also not monotonous.
Yeah, I'm just having flashbacks to my vision states, you know. So my first 3 ayahuasca ceremonies were actually done at the old London Real Studios, and the shaman actually came there, and we would do it overnight, and she would sing, and she was the best shaman because when I would get sick, I would run in the bathroom and I would lock the door and I would purge in there. And she would just keep singing in the other room. She, you know, a great shaman doesn't knock on the door, doesn't ask if you're okay. She just kept the space and allowed me to do that. But once I had my difficult woodshed moments and purged, I was always in that state that you're kind of talking about, where then I'm kind of just going out and the trauma's kind of gone, and I'm now just looking at all the amazing possibilities in the universe in my life. And I remember just laying on my bathroom floor, which felt like, you know, the presidential suite at the Ritz or something at that point, and like having those moments.
Yeah. And then, you know, you realize that a lot of the things that you were thinking about in your waking life, like everything I decided for the first 3 days, by day 5, when I'm in the vision state and have access to that superpower that we get when we have that kind of clarity from the shift in perspective, it was like, oh, I don't need to do any of this stuff. Like, my life is amazing. And that was the overwhelming lesson, is how absolutely incredible and blessed and beautiful my life is, and how sad and how much grief I felt for not enjoying my life the way I could, because I'm always thinking about something I did in the past I could have done better, something I could do in the future, you know, that I could plan for and plot for. But in the present moment, my life has been and is absolutely stunning. And, you know, I hadn't spent nearly enough time appreciating that. You get used to things, and then your mind will start wandering to the past or the future. And so that was the real gift of this, is when that blindfold came off, I was just sobbing, just weeping, looking at the beautiful world that I had access to, like the visions that I was able to see and hear and do and explore. And also the sadness of recognizing I'd let so many of the moments of that, like that in my life, just pass me by. So if I look back now, I have one singular regret. The only regret, I wouldn't change a thing, because I've learned so much from everything, all of the mistakes, all the failures, all the explorations. The only thing I would change is just to take more time to enjoy my life in the present moment and just really appreciate everything that I have, because it's, as I said, it's absolutely stunning. And that's the case for most of us. You know, our lives are just an absolute gem, and we're just not there appreciating it.
Yeah, super well said. You mentioned that experience was like more powerful than anything in, say, the past 7 years in the psychedelic realm. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about, you know, the past 10 years of your experiences, and I'll just quickly share mine. I mean, after those 3 ceremonies for me in 2012, and I had the first one, which again was really out of my comfort zone, but I got a few lessons about, you know, I was dating a woman at the time, and she had a daughter, and I was seeing them, but I made a decision then to like move into them and start a family and bring them into my life. And I forced myself to do 2 more ceremonies that year, because I knew it was uncomfortable, but I knew I had to go in and just force myself to come to terms with some more things, and your parents' divorce and a lot of that stuff. And so I did that year. And then I played around with some psilocybin, you know, I listened to Terrence McKenna. I did some big doses, like 4.5 grams, I think as big as I did. And I had some experiences, but a lot of it was machine elves and digging in my brain. And I never got those lessons that I got from ayahuasca. And, I tried DMT a couple times, but that was it. And then I stopped. And it wasn't until 2 years ago that I went down to Soltara and we were going to make a movie. And I went down with Dennis McKenna. And so, of course, when I'm making a movie or doing a show, then I'll go do it, right? So whatever it takes. But I got, 3 of the most powerful experiences of my life. I mean, one was the single most profound experience of my life. And I had an observation that, for me, ayahuasca was the only psychedelic. It was the mother of psychedelics. I mean, for me, it was the one that always teaches me lessons. I mean, literally, I have takeaways. Literally, I had like 10 things I needed to do with my life. And I know I need to go back, but I haven't been back. And I know I'm going to have to push myself to go back. So anyways, those are my experiences. I'm curious what yours are like and what it's like to hear me say that stuff.
Well, I think you're right. I think ayahuasca is the mother teacher, and that's what they call it in, madrecita, like little mother, like the mother of all of the different plants down in the jungle. And of course they're referring to the vine, but the vine mixed with the leaves creates the brew, and that we typically call ayahuasca. But it's incredibly powerful. And I think one of the reasons why it's so powerful is it's working on 2 different aspects. One, it's working on your psyche and helping you explore different aspects of your psyche. But the other part is the purge, which is helping release where you're storing that in the body. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. And in that book, it talks about how we hold trauma in our body in different places. And I think that's something that people overlook. You see a dog and a dog runs into a screen door, runs into a window, or falls off something. Immediately they shake. Well, why do they shake? Well, they shake to get all that trauma out of their fascia, get all that memory. Well, some gnarly shit happens to us. We don't shake it out. We don't ecstatic dance. We don't scream it out and go run around. Maybe we'll hit the gym and work out, and that's probably a healthy adaptation to that. But we're storing so much of this. Most of us will just cry and like huddle up in our own room and not do the natural thing, which is to get this out of our body, do some intense breath work or some way that we can somatically release it. But ayahuasca is doing that for us. It's squeezing all our organs and pushing them all out, either up or down, one way or another, or usually both. It's going to come out of your body as you're working the stuff out in your psyche. And there's no other plants that really do it, with that kind of double action precision other than ayahuasca. And of course, the DMT as a psychedelic is pretty incredible. It's in a league of its own. It's incredible. It's really unique what it gives you access to. It feels like it goes beyond your own psyche and opens you up to something that's beyond your normal purview, like another whole dimensional access. And other psychedelics can do that, of course, and you can have that in the normal waking state as well. It's not the only thing that can get you to the access of something that seems outside of what you can normally access. But ayahuasca does that regularly. And so some of the experiences that you have from that are really second to none. And that's not to downplay the other experiences from the other plants. They all have their own incredible value. It's like, you have your favorite of the Avengers, but you appreciate all of them, like even Hawkeye, like he's still got his skills and he's still dope, so.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah. I remember I did 3 in Soltara, and the first one, it had been so long for me. And what typically happened in the past was my stomach would hurt so much during the ceremony. But also back in the day, I was drinking a lot. So I think that's why. And so this time my stomach didn't hurt. And but I always hate to purge, maybe it's also my control factor. So I was like, I'm not going to throw up, which is the worst way to go into a ceremony. But I didn't the first time, but then the next night, I mean, for example, actually after the first ceremony, Dennis McKenna and Daniel Cleland, the guy who runs it down there, came over and they were like, that was really weak medicine. And I was like, really? It seemed okay to me. So we all convinced ourselves to have like the double dose the next time. And then, of course, everything came up. It all came out. And, again, that ceremony is still changing the course of my life today. And, but again, it's just such a powerful thing. And I sometimes sit in this chair, Aubrey, and I'm sitting across from massively intelligent people who have never allowed themselves to have the psychedelic experience, maybe because of cultural conditioning or emotional baggage or no access, or maybe they just didn't hear Aubrey Marcus in 2010, and it never planted the seed. And they look at me and they say, I think that can be done through meditation. That can be done through breath work. And I look at them and I'm just thinking, nope. There's no way my life would have been transformed in that time period. And the time was crucial. Like, my daughter at the time was 8, now she's 16. I couldn't do it at she's 16, that would have been too late. So I needed to make those changes then, and it would have taken too long with the therapy and the stuff. So I think I'm right when I say I disagree with you. I think the psychedelic experience is so important, for some people.
Absolutely. Because to get to the reward for your meditation practice, just like the, Bharati, who runs the Darkness Retreat, said, it took her years to actually deepen her meditation practice enough that she could experience without any assistance the kind of altered states that she had the access to now. It took her years. So for someone like us, we're not going to be able to dedicate years to our meditation practice before we even find the reward. We need to taste the reward now. And ideally, we have the change that happens now, and that's what psychedelics can offer. But to expect that somebody's going to have a 5-year breathwork practice for a reward that they don't even know, that they're just taking on faith, that it's really unlikely that that's going to happen. And I do think that you can get there with enough of a dedicated practice and just really making this a primary goal of your life. But it's not practical. It's not pragmatic for most of us. And psychedelics can drop you into that state and start to heal things, start to give you those transcendent experiences, which are probably the most significant source of healing that we have. Like the research being done by Johns Hopkins, they're studying what the effect of a single dose of psilocybin is on somebody. And the effect spans, like you said, a lifetime. So what is it that's healing? It's not the actual drug itself, because it's completely out of your system in a day, 2 days, a week, whatever. So what is it that heals? Well, it's the transcendent experience. And psychedelics can reliably give you a transcendent experience, which can absolutely alter the course of your life. So can breath work and meditation, but maybe 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, if you continue on that path. And good for you if you do that. It's not that you can't get there that way, but to have that transcendent experience now, like you said, when your daughter's 8 instead of 16, that is a massive difference. And the benefit is just completely exponential. She'll feel that for her whole life. You've felt that for your whole life, all of those years. I mean, it makes a strong case for the responsible use of psychedelics to those people who are called to it. And I think, as the information gets out there, as legalization comes about for MDMA and psilocybin, I think more and more people are going to be called to this medicine just because it has so much potential.
Yeah, and it has its own built-in barriers to entry, and thank God that it does, which is why I haven't run back for 2 years because, as I said to Dennis before I went in, I'm feeling some trepidation, and he says, if you don't, that means you're not paying attention. So, it definitely has those built-in pieces to make it to where you have to earn it, I guess you would say, or, you have to be ready to go to a lot of places. And so it's not something that easily can be abused, whatever that means. And I'm never one to tell someone how to take their psychedelics, but I would agree that, having them on a canal in Amsterdam might not be the best use of that for a specific purpose. So yeah, I agree with you. I think they're an incredible piece of technology for the human soul and the human race. And I'm just so glad that we're talking about it. There's amazing people out there funding studies. We got the folks here at Imperial College. We've had pretty much all of them on the show. They're doing great work. And, just imagine kids these days, when they were your age for the Vision Quest, now they can go on and, research articles, and maybe it's legal in certain states, and there's podcasts, and now they can really get an education. So yeah, it's powerful.
I think it's when I look at everything that's troubling and challenging in our world right now, and then I look at the optimistic case, like what gives me real hope, and it's the psychedelic renaissance. Things will change when people change. There's not going to be a charismatic leader who's, drank ayahuasca 50 times and gets elected as president and comes in and is like, you know what, we're changing everything. Like, that's unrealistic. It's not going to happen because, the leadership lags what the people demand. That leader will come when the people demand it. So what's going to change the way that the people feel, how they love one another, how they think about their own life and how they think about the world? Can they appreciate their life enough that they want to actually give back to it? I think that's part of the the problem that we have is just this lack of gratitude. You know, like we just kind of ignore the beauty of life and our fellow humans and everybody else around us, probably because we don't feel that we have enough worth to give back to them. And it's one of those like laws of reciprocity. So if we actually take in and absorb how much the earth gives us, well, then we'll be compelled to give back to the earth. But we don't want to do that. So we just ignore it. We take it for granted, and then we don't feel that push of reciprocity. But when you do the plants, you start to feel these things. And then now that they're coming online, both legally in our country, hopefully pretty soon, and then in the world, in all the places like Soltara, all of these different opportunities coming online, I think it has a chance to dramatically shift large portions of the population. And when that happens, I think that population will demand different leadership, and we can enter a new era. So, you know, it gives me a lot of hope. You know, if there was, this is Gandalf coming in, you know, and movie 2 from the Fellowship of the Ring, when the orcs are just about to take over the stronghold and it all looks lost, and it's that dawn of the 5th day, and he comes riding in on a white horse and his staff is held up in the sky and the sun hits it. It's like, oh shit, like it's gonna work out. To me, I think psychedelics have that potential. And I know that sounds like a crazy story, but I've seen what it's been able to do in my life and so many other lives. I mean, your story is another example of this. It's made dramatic shifts in individuals. I've watched people heal so much trauma from all of these different medicines, and then open themselves up to love and, you know, the desire to help and share and be charitable, and just change the way that they operate within their own lives and operate within society. And so when this gets to scale, I think it has the power to really change everything. And that gives me a ton of hope and enthusiasm.
Yeah, and I had a similar conversation with Dennis McKenna after our 3rd ceremony. We were in the cloud forest there in Costa Rica, and we were talking about like, how is there more of this, or how can you get the message out? But one of the things he said is that it is hard to scale this stuff. You know, there's only 30 people you can get in the Malacca in Soltara, and you know, and so that's the only thing that concerns me, because I completely agree with you, but I also worry, like, is there enough access for enough people? Now, maybe we only need to shift 1% of the population, the Maharishi effect, but that concerns me. Does that concern you?
When it concerns ayahuasca, there's a rate limiting factor because it's a plant that's slow growing. The vines don't grow fast. It's not like you put ayahuasca in the ground and it's like corn. You know, you got an 8-foot stalk, you know, by springtime. It doesn't work that way. So, I mean, it can start to be cultivated so that we have more supply, and we could do it in Hawaii. We can do it in lots of different jungle that we're just burning down, you know, wantonly right now. We could actually make a concerted effort and expand it, and then different healers get trained up in the process. But I don't think that's what's going to hit at scale. I think that's going to be something that people who are truly called to it find that experience. But what will get to scale are MDMA and psilocybin, because both of those are synthetic. So just as readily as, you know, someone can push out Advil, they could push out MDMA or psilocybin if they just tune the machines to create those compounds. And those have incredible potential, and the studies are panning out and showing that as well. But they can reliably create these same transcendent experiences within a container that actually facilitates that. So that's what I think is going to get us to scale. Ketamine is another one that's really interesting, and I think people are not using that in the most optimal way to actually unlock the potential of what that medicine is. But it's at least coming online for the treatment of depression, and different people are starting to explore it. But these synthetics, I think, will really carry the bulk of the weight. You know, because when there's that clinic that's just right down the street from you, and somebody goes who you wouldn't expect goes, they just take the chance and they go to have that clinic. They have their MDMA psychotherapy, and then they go back to their construction site, or they go back to their bank job, and they're like, yo, right here off Main Street is a clinic. You'll go and you'll love your life. You'll love your family. You'll love the world more than you ever have in your life. And you're going to feel better than ever. And they're going to be glowing and exuding this energy from every cell. Like, people are going to be like, oh, I want that. I want some of that. So I know that when this gets across the legalization line, which is close, it's got fast track status from the FDA. It's almost available for compassionate care right now based on the post-traumatic stress results, which they're healing, curing, permanently curing 2 out of 3 people with treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress, which is unbelievable. Curing them in 3 sessions. In follow-up studies, they stay cured for years, which is unlike anything that's being offered in the pharmacopoeia of different drugs that are now treating this. Like, we're not creating cures, we're creating dependencies, but this is creating cures. So that's going to be available, and I think it's going to spread fast, and it's going to spread at scale. I don't think there's going to be enough facilities. I think we're going to have, for a while, 3-month, 4-month, 5-month wait lists as soon as this gets out, and people are like, whoa.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website, londonreal.tv, or click the link in the description below.